You can't just leave our HOA. I'm calling the police.
Delilah, the ultimate HOA Karen, was screaming in my driveway like I'd committed murder, all because I'd filed completely legal paperwork to withdraw from the Homeowners Association, perfectly allowed in California. To her, this was a crime. She dialed 911, sunglasses slipping, voice shrill.
Officer, this man is illegally abandoning his HOA duties. Arrest him now.
Sirens blared. A cruiser pulled up fast. The door opened. A tall officer stepped out, removing his sunglasses slowly. Delilah spun around with a victorious grin.
Yes, officer, that's him. Arrest the—
She froze, finger still pointing, mouth open, face turning white. Because the officer staring her down was Marcus, my son. The police sergeant she'd just called to arrest his own father. Dead silence. What would you do if an HOA Karen called the cops on you for something totally legal, only for your own son to show up in uniform? Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess. My name's Grayson Mitchell. I'm 56, and I spent 30 years as a union electrician before retiring. Life was good until 3 years ago when my wife Sarah lost her battle with cancer. We'd bought our house in Willowbrook Estates 10 years earlier specifically because Sarah needed a quiet neighborhood during her treatments. The HOA seemed like a bonus back then. Community pool, security, well-maintained common areas. Sarah loved sitting by that pool in the evenings, watching the sunset reflect off the water. The smell of chlorine and blooming jasmine became the scent of her final peaceful moments. After she passed, the house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories. Our son Marcus, 29 years old, police sergeant in the next county over, kept encouraging me to downsize. "Dad, you're rattling around in there like a marble in a coffee can," he'd say during our Sunday dinners, always the practical one. Marcus became a cop because he genuinely wanted to help people. Weird concept these days, right? Lives about 45 minutes away in his own jurisdiction, which turned out to be critically important later. Then, Delilah Thornwick moved in 4 years ago, and paradise became purgatory. Picture this. 52 years old, high-end real estate agent, drives a white BMW that she washes twice a week with the dedication of a monk polishing a temple. The kind of woman who measures her neighbor's grass with an actual ruler and considers it a public service. Within 6 months, she was running for HOA president on a property values and community standards platform. Translation: I'm going to make everyone's life miserable in the name of perfection. Her shrill voice echoing off garage doors during her self-appointed compliance inspections became the new soundtrack of our neighborhood. Like nails on a chalkboard, but with legal authority. Delilah had a pattern, I learned later. She targeted elderly residents, recent widows, and widowers, anyone who didn't fit her cookie-cutter vision of suburban Stepford wives. The Kowalskis got harassed about their vegetable garden. The Santos family faced constant complaints about their kids' basketball hoop. Mrs. Denver received citations for her non-conforming flower beds that had been there for 15 years. But I was her favorite target, the grieving widower who dared to exist without asking permission. 6 months after Sarah's funeral, I decided I'd had enough. I wanted out of Delilah's little kingdom, wanted to simplify my life without some wannabe dictator breathing down my neck about grass height and mailbox colors. That's when I discovered something interesting about California law. I spent 3 days at the county law library researching HOA withdrawal procedures. Turns out, California Civil Code Section 4145 allows homeowners to withdraw from HOAs with proper notice, as long as there are no outstanding liens or assessments. Knowledge nugget: California law permits HOA withdrawal with 30-day written notice if no liens exist and proper procedures are followed. The key is knowing your state's specific requirements before assuming you're trapped forever. I followed every step perfectly. Certified mail, proper forms, 30-day notice period, everything legal and above board. Delilah's response was swift and vicious. 3 days after filing my withdrawal paperwork, she knocked on my door with a clipboard and that smug smile I'd come to hate. "Grayson, I'm afraid your vegetable garden violates our aesthetic covenants. You'll need to remove it immediately or face escalating fines." The garden Sarah had planted, where she grew tomatoes and herbs during her final summer. The smell of fresh tomatoes mixed with Delilah's overpowering perfume created this nauseating contrast. Life versus artifice, genuine versus fake, everything wrong with the world condensed into one moment. "The garden stays," I told her. "We'll see about that," she replied, making theatrical notes on her clipboard like she was documenting war crimes. 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter demanding $2,300 in withdrawal processing fees that had never existed in our original covenants. Fees that Delilah had apparently invented during what I imagine was a very creative afternoon. Standing in my kitchen, holding that letter, I realized this wasn't going to be simple. This was war. Those fake fees were just the beginning. Within a week of that bogus $20,300 demand, Delilah escalated with the creativity of a mob accountant. She sent another certified letter claiming I owed an additional emergency assessment of $350 per month, retroactive to the day I filed my withdrawal paperwork. Apparently, leaving the HOA triggered some mystical financial penalty that existed nowhere in our original documents. I'm not a lawyer, but I know bullshit when I smell it. And this reeked worse than a fish market in August. So I did what any self-respecting retiree would do. I went digging. The county clerk's office became my second home for 3 days. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead while I requested every HOA filing, amendment, and financial document on record. The musty smell of archived paperwork mixed with burnt coffee from the break room created this oddly comforting research atmosphere, like a library for legal rebels. That's where I met my secret weapon, Ethel Kowalski. 73 years old, retired paralegal from a downtown law firm, sharper than a box of tacks and madder than a wet hornet at Delilah's tactics. Turns out, Ethel had been quietly documenting every suspicious move our HOA president made for the past 2 years, filing everything in color-coded folders with the precision of a forensic accountant. She tried this same garbage on the Hendersons before they moved, Ethel whispered conspiratorially, sliding a manila folder across the clerk's counter. Made up fees, harassment, forced them into bankruptcy, the whole playbook. Her fingers traced through documents with practiced efficiency. But here's what she doesn't know. I spent 40 years catching lawyers who tried to bend the rules. Delilah's an amateur. That's when Ethel dropped the bombshell. From her research, she'd learned that any HOA fee increase requires 67% homeowner approval and proper county filing to be legally enforceable. If your HOA springs surprise fees on you, the smart move is demanding proof they followed legal procedures. Because most of these petty dictators skip the boring paperwork part. Guess what we discovered? Delilah's emergency assessments had never been voted on by homeowners, never filed with the county, never legally enacted, period. She'd simply invented them in her head and expected everyone to pay up out of fear. Armed with this ammunition, I filed a formal complaint with the county about illegal fee assessments and requested a full audit of HOA finances. Ethel helped me draft everything with the precision of a legal surgeon, cross-referencing statutes and citing case law like she was preparing for the Supreme Court. Then I started my own campaign, planting seeds of doubt with neighbors during casual conversations by the mailbox. Hey, did you vote on those new fees? No? Weird, neither did I. Wonder where that money's really going. The sound of doubt spreading through a neighborhood is beautiful, like dominoes falling in slow motion. But Delilah wasn't going down without a fight. 3 days after filing my county complaint, I came home from the grocery store to find my driveway empty. My heart sank faster than a stone. My 1987 Ford pickup, the classic truck I'd been restoring in memory of weekend projects with Sarah, had vanished. A neighbor ran over, breathless and furious. "Grayson, a tow truck just hauled away your Ford. The driver said it was reported as an abandoned vehicle. Can you believe that crap?" I felt my blood pressure spike like a rocket launch. The truck wasn't abandoned. It was a labor of love. I had all the registration paperwork, insurance, everything legal and proper. But Delilah had somehow convinced the city it was junk cluttering up her precious neighborhood. The towing yard wanted $450 to release my truck, plus $35 per day storage fees, for a vehicle that had been legally parked in my own driveway for the crime of having primer spots and needing bodywork. Standing in that dusty tow yard, surrounded by the acrid smell of motor oil and heated metal, I handed over my credit card while the lot attendant smirked with practiced indifference. Lady said it hadn't moved in months, looked like an eyesore. City policy, you know? We just follow orders. Here's the beautiful irony that still makes me laugh. My supposedly abandoned truck started on the first turn of the key and purred like a contented kitten. Ran better than most cars rolling off the assembly line today, smoother than Delilah's lies. That $485 mistake was about to cost her a lot more than money, because now I wasn't just fighting for principle anymore. This had become deeply, personally, vindictively personal. And when you mess with a union electrician's project truck, the one that carries 30 years of Saturday afternoon memories, the smell of WD-40 and Sarah's laughter, you've crossed a line that smart people don't cross. Driving home, windows down, classic rock playing, I made a decision that would change everything. Delilah wanted to play hardball? Fine. But she'd picked the wrong retired tradesman to screw with. Time to show her what real escalation looked like. Delilah's next move was textbook dictator behavior. When you can't win on facts, attack the messenger. A week after getting my truck back, I found a cease and desist letter taped to my front door. Not delivered by mail like a civilized human being, but slapped right there for all the neighbors to see like some kind of public shaming ritual. The letter accused me of invading neighbor privacy with my security cameras and demanded their immediate removal. Now here's the thing about my cameras. I'd installed them after Sarah's jewelry went missing during an estate sale 3 months after her funeral. Nothing fancy, just basic security monitors covering my own property. They faced my driveway, my garage, my backyard, nobody else's business but mine. But Delilah had convinced herself that my perfectly legal surveillance somehow violated her constitutional right to snoop around other people's property without being recorded. The crisp sound of her heels clicking on my concrete driveway at dawn had become my personal alarm clock, and frankly, I wanted proof of her harassment campaigns. Time for some expert help. That's when I partnered with Jerome Santos, the 34-year-old cybersecurity specialist who lived 3 houses down. Kid worked for a major tech company, dealt with corporate espionage for a living, and he'd been watching Delilah's antics with the amused detachment of someone who'd seen real criminals in action. "Mr. Mitchell," Jerome said, examining my camera setup while sipping coffee in my garage workshop, "these are about as threatening as a doorbell camera. Want to know what I learned about surveillance law working corporate security cases?" He explained that cameras on your property facing your property are 100% legal in all 50 states. A principle the Supreme Court established decades ago. You have zero expectation of privacy when you're on someone else's visible property. If Delilah didn't want to be recorded, she could stop trespassing on my driveway like some suburban stalker. Jerome upgraded my system with motion-activated cameras and better night vision capabilities. If she wants to play intelligence games with someone who does this professionally, let's make sure we capture every move in crystal clear HD, he grinned. The new cameras revealed something disturbing within 48 hours. Delilah wasn't just harassing me. She was conducting a systematic character assassination campaign. We caught her making rounds to neighbors, claiming I was mentally unstable after Sarah's death and spreading poison about my property, bringing down home values. But the real shocker came when we captured her approaching my late wife's favorite contractor, the guy who'd built Sarah's garden shed, offering him cash to file false reports about unpermitted structures on my property. The smell of fresh sawdust and coffee in my garage had attracted a growing crowd of neighbors who were fed up with Delilah's reign of terror. Coffee meetings became strategy sessions as stories poured out. The Kowalskis faced harassment over their vegetable garden. The Santos family got cited for their kid's basketball hoop. Mrs. Denver received violations for flower beds that predated Delilah's existence. We were building something powerful, a coalition of the righteously pissed off. Then Delilah made her boldest move yet. Tuesday afternoon, while I was replacing a ceiling fan, the doorbell rang. City inspector, clipboard in hand, that serious expression that meant someone was about to get expensive news. "Sir, we've received reports of unpermitted modifications to your property. I need to inspect your security camera installation for building code violations." My blood ran cold. If the city classified my cameras as permanent structures requiring permits, I'd be looking at thousands in fines and removal costs. Delilah had found a potential loophole to destroy my surveillance system through bureaucratic warfare. The inspector spent 45 agonizing minutes examining everything. His heavy work boots clicked on my concrete while he measured mounting heights, checked electrical connections, reviewed property boundaries. I watched 30 years of retirement savings potentially evaporate over some petty HOA vendetta. Finally, he looked up from his clipboard with an unexpected expression, mild irritation. "Everything's completely legal, Mr. Mitchell, Security cameras are personal property, not permanent modifications. No permits required. He paused, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Between you and me, we've received 6 false reports from the same address in the past month, different complaints, all bogus. We keep detailed records of serial filers. That's when I realized Delilah had just handed me a nuclear weapon. Filing false municipal reports is a misdemeanor offense that escalates to harassment charges with repeat violations. The inspector's comments meant the city was building their own criminal file on our HOA president's creative relationship with the truth. Jerome caught the entire inspector visit on camera naturally. We now had video evidence of Delilah's latest failed power play, plus official city documentation of her pattern of false reporting. She's not just desperate anymore, Ethel observed during our next garage strategy meeting, reviewing footage on Jerome's laptop. She's crossing into criminal behavior. That changes everything. The acrid smell of motor oil from my project truck mixed with fresh coffee created this oddly motivating atmosphere, like a war room where justice was being carefully constructed, one piece of evidence at a time. Delilah wanted to escalate into illegal territory? Perfect. But every move she made was being documented, cataloged, and prepared for the day when all her crimes came due. And that reckoning was approaching faster than she could possibly imagine. Delilah's desperation reached new heights when she realized her intimidation tactics weren't working. 2 weeks after the inspector incident, I got served with legal papers that made my morning coffee taste like battery acid. A temporary restraining order, filed in county court, claiming I had threatened her at the monthly HOA meeting. According to her sworn statement, I'd cornered her after the meeting and said, "You'll pay for this, Delilah. I know where you live." Complete fiction. What I'd actually said was, "The homeowners will pay for your lies eventually, and everyone knows where accountability stops." Meaning her position as president. But Delilah had taken my words, twisted them like a pretzel soaked in poison, and somehow convinced a judge I was making personal threats. The restraining order banned me from HOA common areas, meetings, and coming within 50 feet of her precious person. Basically, she'd turned me into a prisoner in my own neighborhood while painting herself as the victim. Sitting at my kitchen table, reading that legal document while autumn rain drummed against the windows, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Sarah's cancer diagnosis, genuine fear. Not of Delilah, but of how far she was willing to destroy an innocent person to protect her petty kingdom. This wasn't neighborhood politics anymore. This was scorched earth warfare with my life as collateral damage. But Delilah had made one critical mistake in her rush to commit perjury. Jerome's upgraded security system had recorded the entire HOA meeting, including the post-meeting conversation she'd twisted into a threat. Better yet, Ethel had been standing right next to us with her smartphone, capturing everything from a different angle like some kind of legal ninja. "Time to bring in the heavy artillery," Ethel announced, pulling out her old Rolodex with the satisfaction of a general calling up reinforcements. "I know just the attorney for this mess." Through her paralegal network, she connected me with Patricia Denver, a razor-sharp lawyer who specialized in harassment cases and worked pro bono for retired military and civil servants. The kind of attorney who made corporate bullies wet themselves. Patricia reviewed our evidence with surgical precision. Original audio recordings, Jerome's HD video footage, witness statements from 3 neighbors, documentation of Delilah's escalating false complaints. Her conference table looked like mission control for a legal space launch. "This woman made a catastrophic error," Patricia explained, organizing documents with practiced efficiency. "Filing a restraining order requires sworn testimony under penalty of perjury. When we prove she knowingly lied in her statement, that's felony territory." The legal system usually moves slower than continental drift, but Patricia's evidence packet accelerated everything. Audio analysis from Jerome's cybersecurity contacts proved our recording was authentic and unedited. Multiple witness statements corroborated our version. The judge who'd granted Delilah's temporary order scheduled an emergency hearing within days. Meanwhile, I filed my own restraining order against Delilah, documenting her escalating harassment pattern, trespassing, false municipal reports, and now perjury. The delicious irony. She'd taught me exactly how the system worked by abusing it. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Neighbors who'd been quietly enduring Delilah's tyranny suddenly found their voices. Phone calls, coffee conversations, supportive visits. The community was rallying, and Delilah could feel her power base crumbling. The hearing was set for Thursday morning at 9 a.m. But Wednesday night, Delilah made the most desperate move of her campaign. I was in my garage around 8 p.m. organizing tools and listening to classic rock when car doors slammed in my driveway with unusual urgency. Not the friendly sound of neighbors stopping by. This was official business. 2 police officers walked toward my front door, their flashlights cutting through October darkness like searchlights hunting for criminals. My blood turned to ice water. Delilah had escalated to false emergency calls. "Mr. Mitchell?" The lead officer was young, professional, clearly uncomfortable with whatever story he'd been fed. "We received a 911 call reporting a domestic disturbance at this address. Caller claimed you were threatening to burn down the neighborhood and appeared mentally unstable." The smell of autumn leaves mixed with my own nervous sweat as I explained our situation. These officers had no idea they'd been dragged into an HOA civil war, manipulated into becoming weapons in Delilah's harassment campaign. I showed them the restraining order paperwork, Patricia's business card, and Jerome's video evidence on my phone. The officers spent 30 tense minutes reviewing everything while Delilah probably watched from her window, expecting to see me led away in handcuffs for crimes I'd never committed. Instead, the senior officer handed me his card with an expression I recognized: professional disgust. "Mr. Mitchell, this is the 4th false report we've received about this address in 6 weeks. We'll be documenting this pattern for the district attorney. Whoever keeps making unfounded 911 calls could face felony charges for abusing emergency services and filing false reports." After they left, I sat in my kitchen drinking bourbon and staring at that business card. The taste of good whiskey couldn't wash away the bitter realization that Delilah was willing to weaponize police against a grieving widower over neighborhood politics. But she'd just committed the biggest tactical error of her war. Tomorrow's hearing wasn't just about restraining orders anymore. Patricia now had fresh evidence of Delilah making false 911 calls, abusing emergency services, and escalating her harassment into criminal territory, the kind of evidence that turns civil disputes into felony prosecutions. The sound of rain on my roof mixed with distant sirens somewhere in the neighborhood. Probably another emergency call, another genuine crisis delayed because Delilah was wasting police resources on her personal vendetta. She wanted to play in the criminal justice system? Perfect. But when you file false police reports against a man whose son carries a badge, you'd better pray your lies are bulletproof. Because tomorrow, Delilah's house of cards was about to collapse in spectacular, felonious fashion. The restraining order hearing never happened. Thursday morning, 8:30 a.m., I was sitting in the courthouse lobby with Patricia, reviewing our evidence one final time when her phone buzzed with an urgent text. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. "We need to step outside, now." In the courthouse parking lot, surrounded by the crisp autumn air and the distant hum of morning traffic, Patricia pulled out a thick manila envelope that hadn't been there an hour ago. This just came from the county auditor's office, emergency delivery. Her hands were actually shaking as she opened it. "Grayson, your HOA audit results, they're catastrophic." She spread financial documents across the hood of her Honda like she was laying out evidence of war crimes. Numbers, bank statements, invoices, all stamped with official county seals. "Your homeowners association is missing $52,000 from the reserve fund." I felt like someone had just told me gravity had been canceled. "What the hell are you talking about?" "It gets worse." Patricia's finger traced down a column of payments. "Delilah's consulting company, Thornwick Property Solutions, has been receiving monthly checks for services that don't exist. Landscape consulting, property management, legal advisory services, all fabricated." The smell of asphalt and car exhaust mixed with the sickening realization that I'd been fighting a war while my enemy was robbing us blind. Delilah hadn't just been harassing residents, she'd been systematically looting our community fund for 24 months. "How much exactly?" I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer would be brutal. $52,347.83. She's been billing the HOA for her own company at rates between $700 and $1,200 monthly. Patricia's voice carried the cold precision of a coroner delivering cause of death. I leaned against her car, feeling like every conflict of the past 6 months had been recontextualized in an instant. The fake fees, the harassment campaigns, the desperate attempts to discredit me, it was all cover for grand larceny. When someone embezzles from a homeowners association, that's felony theft in California, the kind of crime that destroys lives and sends middle-aged real estate agents to state prison. There's something else, Patricia continued, pulling out a second folder. Ethel's paralegal network uncovered Delilah's history. She was HOA president at Meadowbrook Estates before your neighborhood. That position ended with a lawsuit, undisclosed settlement, and her immediate departure. The pattern crystallized with terrifying clarity. Delilah was a serial community predator, moving from HOA to HOA, gaining positions of financial trust, then systematically bleeding reserve funds while terrorizing anyone who asked inconvenient questions. I thought about Sarah's final years, how we'd trusted the HOA with our monthly dues, believing that money was maintaining our community. Instead, it had been funding Delilah's lifestyle while she made our lives hell for having the audacity to exist in her kingdom. What happens now? I managed to ask. Patricia's expression reminded me of a prosecutor who'd just been handed a confession. We have two paths: handle this as a civil dispute and maybe recover some money through lawsuits that take years, or we refer the evidence to the district attorney's office and destroy her criminally. The taste of courthouse parking lot air had suddenly become the sweetest thing I'd experienced since Sarah's remission announcement. After months of legal intimidation, false police reports, and harassment that made me question my own sanity, I finally held nuclear-grade evidence. What would you do? She's stolen from 34 families, abused the court system, filed multiple false police reports, committed perjury under oath, and turned your neighborhood into her personal ATM. Patricia's smile could have melted steel. I'd end her completely. So, standing in that parking lot, thinking about elderly neighbors who'd scraped together HOA dues on fixed incomes while Delilah bought designer shoes with their money, the decision became crystal clear. Call the district attorney. Patricia made the call immediately, speaking with someone in white-collar crimes who apparently owed her favors. Within minutes, we had an appointment for Monday morning to present evidence for criminal prosecution. Walking back toward the courthouse to formally dismiss our restraining order hearing, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Sarah's death: the intoxicating power of absolute moral authority. Delilah had spent 6 months trying to destroy me for legally leaving her association. Now I was about to destroy her for illegally stealing from it. But first, emergency community meeting. Every neighbor deserved to know their HOA president was a felony thief, and together we could ensure she never victimized another community. The sound of my footsteps on courthouse concrete felt like the march of inevitable justice. Time to let 34 families know their worst neighbor was about to become their most expensive lesson in criminal stupidity. That evening, my garage workshop became mission control for the most satisfying operation of my retirement. Within 4 hours of the courthouse revelation, word had spread through our neighborhood faster than gossip at a church social. My phone rang constantly. Neighbors who'd been quietly enduring Delilah's tyranny suddenly found their voices, and they were all saying the same thing. How do we destroy her legally? Jerome arrived first, laptop bag slung over his shoulder like a cybersecurity soldier reporting for duty. Mr. Mitchell, if we're taking down a serial embezzler, let's build a case so tight she'll confess just to stop the evidence presentation. The smell of fresh coffee percolating mixed with familiar motor oil from my project truck as neighbors filed into my garage like revolutionaries planning the overthrow of suburban tyranny. Ethel brought 3 boxes of HOA documents she'd been secretly organizing for months. The Santos family contributed photos of harassment campaigns. Mrs. Denver arrived with a folder of fake violation notices that would make prosecutors salivate. Here's our battlefield, Jerome announced, setting up his laptop on my workbench between coffee cups and evidence folders. Delilah's running a sophisticated embezzlement operation, but she's also committed multiple felonies trying to cover it up. Each crime makes the next one easier to prosecute. His spreadsheet looked like something from a federal fraud investigation. Every stolen payment, every fabricated invoice, every dollar taken from community funds, all cross-referenced with dates, bank records, and supporting documentation that would make FBI accountants proud. The beauty is systematic repetition, Jerome explained, clicking through screens with the efficiency of someone who'd caught corporate thieves professionally. She didn't steal impulsively. She created organized criminal enterprise over 24 months. That's RICO territory if prosecutors want to go nuclear. But we needed smoking gun evidence of active theft, not just historical records. Jerome's solution was brilliant: covert surveillance at the HOA mailbox. Since it sat on public easement, cameras required no permits and captured legally admissible footage. Most embezzlers eventually returned to destroy evidence or steal more, and we wanted that moment in crystal clear video. "The technical setup is gorgeous," Jerome said, installing equipment that looked like standard mailbox lighting. "Motion-activated night vision, direct cloud upload with encrypted backup. If she tries stealing records or processing fraudulent payments, we'll have real-time felony documentation." Our masterstroke was the honey trap. I'd create fake withdrawal fee payment documentation, making it appear I was finally surrendering to her illegal demands. The psychology was perfect. She'd been fighting me for months, and this apparent victory would make her careless. When she processed the fraudulent payment through her normal embezzlement channels, we'd have video evidence of active theft. "It's psychologically irresistible," Ethel observed, reviewing our strategy while sipping coffee strong enough to resurrect the dead. "She's so desperate to defeat you personally, she'll grab the money without thinking twice." The garage had transformed into something between NASA mission control and a prosecutor's evidence room. Financial spreadsheets covered every horizontal surface. Timeline charts replaced tool displays on pegboards, and evidence boxes were stacked with military precision that would have made Sarah proud. Around 9 p.m., Patricia arrived carrying legal documents and the predatory smile of someone who'd spent the afternoon discussing felony prosecutions with very serious people. "The district attorney is extremely interested," she announced, spreading preliminary criminal complaint paperwork across my workbench. "White-collar crime division calls this textbook organized fraud with aggravating circumstances. They want enough evidence to justify asking for maximum sentences." That phrase sent chills down my spine. The good kind. Maximum sentences meant Delilah wouldn't just get probation and fines. She was looking at real prison time, permanent felony record, complete destruction of her real estate license and financial future. The legal preparation required forensic precision. Financial experts calculated exact theft amounts: $52,347.83. Audio forensics had proven perjury in her restraining order filings. Video evidence documented systematic harassment and false police reports spanning 6 months. "Monday's presentation is crucial," Patricia explained, organizing documents with surgical care. "DA's office reviews evidence, determines charges, and if prosecution moves forward, Delilah gets arrested within days, probably at her real estate office, in front of clients and colleagues." The image of Delilah being handcuffed at work, her carefully constructed professional image exploding in spectacular public humiliation, was almost too delicious to contemplate. Community coordination reached military levels of organization. Jerome created encrypted group communications for real-time updates. 31 of 34 households confirmed they wanted criminal prosecution. Backup plans included media involvement if charges somehow failed to materialize. "Bank cooperation is already secured," Jerome added, consulting his tablet with satisfied efficiency. "They'll provide security footage of fraudulent payment processing, complete transaction histories, and expert testimony about systematic financial fraud patterns." Around midnight, as neighbors finally headed home carrying evidence copies and legal contact information, Ethel lingered to help organize final documentation, while my old garage radio played classic rock that Sarah used to love. "You know what makes this perfect?" she said, sealing evidence envelopes with the satisfaction of someone who'd waited decades for justice. "Delilah taught us how to destroy her by showing us exactly which laws she was breaking. The smell of garage coffee mixed with crisp night air created this strangely perfect atmosphere, justice brewing alongside caffeine, community solidarity developing like vintage photographs in chemical developer baths. Sunday dinner with Marcus carried special weight. Without revealing operational details, I asked hypothetical questions about evidence presentation and criminal procedure. Marcus unknowingly provided tactical advice that would prove invaluable for Monday's prosecution meeting. "Dad, hypothetically speaking, if civilians were building a criminal case, prosecutors love chronological organization and documented chain of custody," he said, carving pot roast with the authority of someone who'd testified in hundreds of trials. "The more homework civilians do properly, the stronger the case becomes." Perfect guidance for what was coming. Monday morning, I'd walk into the district attorney's office carrying 2 years of meticulously documented evidence against a serial community predator. By week's end, Delilah would probably be in county jail, wondering how her perfect embezzlement scheme had become her perfect destruction. Sitting in my garage that Sunday night, surrounded by evidence of systematic crime and community solidarity, I finally understood what Sarah meant when she talked about fighting for what matters. This wasn't just about HOA politics anymore. This was about ensuring no other community would suffer what ours had endured. Monday morning's meeting with the district attorney went better than I dared hope. The white-collar crime prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Rodriguez, spent 2 hours reviewing our evidence with the methodical precision of someone who'd put away corporate executives for breakfast. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and delivered the words I'd been praying to hear. "Mr. Mitchell, we're filing charges. Multiple felonies. This woman is going to prison." But Delilah wasn't going down without a final, desperate fight. Tuesday afternoon, I discovered she'd been busy while we were building her legal coffin. The first sign of trouble came when Jerome called, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She's trying to cancel tomorrow's emergency HOA meeting, sent forged emails to the management company claiming medical emergency, family crisis, the whole sob story playbook." The management company had bought it initially, until Ethel called them directly with copies of Delilah's recent public appearances at real estate events. Hard to claim medical emergency when you're photographed shaking hands at property closings the same day. But Delilah's sabotage campaign was just getting started. Wednesday morning brought a parade of neighbors to my door, each carrying variations of the same toxic story. Delilah had been making rounds since dawn, spreading rumors about my mental decline following Sarah's death, claiming I was obsessively targeting successful women, and that my evidence was fabricated by a grieving man seeking revenge. The smell of fresh coffee in my kitchen turned bitter as I listened to Mrs. Denver describe Delilah's performance. "She actually cried, Grayson. Fake tears claiming you're stalking her because she reminds you of Sarah. It was disgusting theater." 3 neighbors had been contacted with offers of reduced HOA fees if they'd sign statements questioning my stability. Delilah was literally trying to buy character witnesses while sitting on $52,000 of stolen community funds. That's when Jerome's upgraded surveillance system captured something extraordinary. Thursday evening, hidden cameras recorded Delilah approaching my late wife's favorite contractor, the honest guy who'd built Sarah's garden shed. But this wasn't a social call. "I need you to file complaints about unpermitted structures on Grayson's property," she told him, standing in his driveway like some suburban crime boss. "I'll pay you $800 cash, plus I can guarantee your company gets the next 3 HOA maintenance contracts." The contractor, a decent family man named Miguel who genuinely cared about Sarah's comfort during her final months, looked at Delilah like she'd just propositioned him to burn down an orphanage. "Lady, you want me to lie to the city about a man whose wife I watched die of cancer? For money?" His voice carried the disgusted tone of someone being asked to betray basic human decency. "Think about it," Delilah pressed, apparently immune to shame. $800 now, thousands more in future contracts, all for some simple paperwork. And Miguel's response was perfect. "Get off my property before I call the police myself." Jerome had captured the entire attempted bribery on multiple camera angles, crystal clear audio, with timestamp documentation that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. Attempted bribery is a felony regardless of whether it's accepted, and now we had Delilah committing crimes on video while already under investigation. The community response to her smear campaign was swift and brutal. Friday afternoon, my garage filled with neighbors who were no longer just frustrated. They were furious. 32 households confirmed attendance at Saturday's emergency meeting, with several families driving back from weekend trips specifically to participate in Delilah's public destruction. "She's lost her mind," observed Tom Santos, reviewing video footage on Jerome's laptop. "Offering bribes while the DA is building felony cases? That's not desperation, that's criminal stupidity." Ethel had been quietly documenting every attempted bribery, every false rumor, every illegal offer Delilah made during her final week sabotage campaign. She's adding new felony charges faster than prosecutors can write them up. It's like watching someone dig their own grave with an excavator. But the most satisfying development came Friday evening. The fake payment trap had worked perfectly. Delilah, desperate to claim victory over me, had processed my fraudulent withdrawal fee payment through her normal embezzlement channels, adding another $700 to her theft total. Bank security cameras captured her forging additional fees onto the deposit slip, while our mailbox surveillance recorded her stealing the check from HOA mail. The evidence chain is complete, Patricia announced during our final strategy meeting. Grand larceny, organized fraud, attempted bribery, mail theft, filing false police reports, perjury, abuse of fiduciary duty. She's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted on all counts. 20 years in state prison for a 52-year-old real estate agent meant her life was effectively over. No career, no license, no financial future. Complete personal destruction in exchange for stealing from elderly neighbors and harassing a grieving widower. The sharp click of bank security doors during evidence collection had become the sound of justice being served with compound interest. Saturday morning arrived with autumn sunshine that felt like divine approval for what was coming. In 6 hours, our entire community would gather to formally remove Delilah as HOA president while prosecutors finalized her felony charges. But first, she'd make one final, desperate move that would perfectly demonstrate why some people deserve everything that's coming to them. The taste of Saturday morning coffee had never been so satisfying, seasoned with the anticipation of watching systematic evil face systematic justice. Saturday morning's emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., but Delilah's final meltdown began at dawn. My phone started ringing at 6:15 with the first of what would become a dozen frantic calls from neighbors. Delilah had launched a social media blitz that made her previous desperate moves look like amateur hour. "Grayson, you need to see this," Jerome said, his voice tight with disbelief. "She's created fake Facebook accounts and she's posting lies faster than we can screenshot them." I threw on clothes and drove to Jerome's house where his home office had transformed into a digital forensics laboratory. 3 monitors displayed a nightmare of fabricated social media posts, all targeting me with escalating accusations. The first fake account, Concerned Willowbrook Neighbor, posted doctored photos claiming I'd damaged community property during violent outbursts. The images were obviously manipulated. My truck digitally placed at locations I'd never visited, timestamps altered to match her fictional narratives. "She's not just lying anymore," Jerome observed, tracing IP addresses with the efficiency of someone who'd caught corporate hackers professionally. "This is systematic defamation designed to destroy your reputation before the meeting." A second fake account, Neighborhood Safety Watch, claimed I'd been stalking elderly residents and making threats against women living alone. The posts included my address, suggested I was dangerous, and urged people to protect their families from my unstable behavior. The smell of Jerome's strong morning coffee mixed with the sickening realization that Delilah was willing to destroy an innocent man's reputation to save herself from prison. She'd crossed from financial crimes into territory that could genuinely ruin lives, but her masterstroke was contacting Channel 7 News with a completely fabricated story. At 8 a.m., my doorbell rang with the aggressive persistence of someone who expected answers. I opened it to find a young reporter holding a microphone like a weapon, camera operator positioned for ambush journalism. "Mr. Mitchell? Jennifer Walsh, Channel 7 Investigative Unit. We received reports that you've been harassing elderly neighbors and threatening community leaders. Care to comment?" My blood pressure spiked like a launched rocket. Delilah had convinced local media that I was the neighborhood predator, not her. Standing in my doorway, facing cameras that could broadcast her lies to hundreds of thousands of viewers, I felt the same helpless rage I'd experienced watching Sarah fight cancer. Fury at injustice I couldn't immediately control. "Those reports are completely false," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "The person who contacted you is under investigation for embezzling $52,000 from our homeowners association." Jennifer's expression shifted from accusatory to curious. "Do you have evidence of these embezzlement claims?" 20 minutes later, Jennifer and her camera operator were sitting in my garage, reviewing financial documents, audio recordings, and video evidence with the growing excitement of journalists who'd stumbled onto a real story. "This is incredible," she murmured, examining bank records that showed Delilah's systematic theft. "We came here expecting a neighborhood dispute story, but this is organized criminal fraud." Jerome arrived with his laptop, demonstrating how he'd traced the fake social media accounts to Delilah's home IP address. Digital forensics expert analysis proved the photos were manipulated, timestamps were altered, and the entire smear campaign originated from her computer. She called us with fake accusations to distract from real crimes, Jennifer realized, her reporter instincts shifting into investigation mode. "Can we get copies of this evidence? This could be our lead story tonight." But Delilah's digital warfare was just the opening act of her final performance. Around 9:30 a.m., 30 minutes before the emergency meeting, neighbors started calling with reports that made my stomach drop like a stone. Delilah had filed another false police report. This time, she'd claimed I'd violated the restraining order by lurking near her property with surveillance equipment and threatening to burn down her house. According to her 911 call, I was armed and dangerous and posed immediate threat to community safety. The irony was perfect in its cruelty. While I'd been in Jerome's house reviewing evidence of her crimes, she was telling police I'd been stalking her from impossible locations. But this false report would be her final mistake. The responding officers were the same ones who documented her pattern of fraudulent emergency calls over the past month. When they reviewed security footage showing my truck parked in Jerome's driveway during the alleged stalking incident, their professional patience finally snapped. "Mr. Mitchell," the senior officer explained, standing in my driveway while neighbors gathered for the meeting. "This is the 7th false report she's filed about you. The district attorney wants to add multiple counts of filing false police reports and abuse of emergency services to her existing charges. 7 false 911 calls in 6 weeks. Each one wasting police resources, endangering genuine emergency response, and terrorizing an innocent man for the crime of exposing her theft." Walking toward the HOA clubhouse at 9:55 a.m., surrounded by 32 determined neighbors and followed by Channel 7 news cameras, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Sarah's final remission. The absolute certainty that justice was about to be served perfectly. Delilah's social media smear campaign had backfired spectacularly. Her fake police report had added more felony charges, and her attempt to manipulate the media had resulted in investigative reporters documenting her crimes for public broadcast. The metallic taste of autumn air mixed with the sweet anticipation of watching someone who'd terrorized an entire community finally face the consequences of systematic evil. In 5 minutes, Delilah would walk into that clubhouse expecting to control another meeting. Instead, she was about to discover that her perfect crime had become her perfect destruction, broadcast live on the evening news for the whole city to witness. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way, and Delilah was about to get a masterclass in criminal justice. The HOA clubhouse had never seen anything like this. 34 households crammed into a room designed for 20, with Channel 7 cameras capturing every moment of what would become the most satisfying community meeting in suburban history. The air buzzed with electricity that had nothing to do with the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Delilah arrived at exactly 10 a.m., wearing her usual designer blazer and that smug expression I'd learned to hate. She clearly expected to maintain control of the narrative, probably believing her social media campaign had poisoned enough minds to protect her. She had no idea that half the neighborhood had spent the morning forwarding screenshots of her fake accounts to the police. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, trying to call the meeting to order like some suburban dictator, "I understand there are some concerns about our community leadership, but I want to address the real issue here, the harassment campaign being conducted by certain unstable residents." The collective intake of breath was audible. Even after being exposed as a thief and facing felony charges, she was still trying to paint me as the villain. Ethel stood up first, her 73-year-old voice cutting through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. "Delilah, before you say another word, perhaps you'd like to explain where $52,000 of our community funds went." The color drained from Delilah's face faster than water down a broken drain. She clearly hadn't expected the financial evidence to be public knowledge yet. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her voice cracked like thin ice under pressure. "Those are unfounded accusations from people with personal vendettas." Jerome stepped forward with his laptop, connecting it to the projector with the efficiency of someone who'd been waiting months for this moment. "Actually, we have bank records, forged invoices, and video evidence of systematic embezzlement over 24 months. The projector screen lit up with devastating financial documentation. Every fake payment to Thornwick Property Solutions, every fraudulent consulting fee, every dollar stolen from families who'd trusted her with their community investments. The room erupted. Neighbors who'd been quietly enduring her harassment finally found their voices, creating a crescendo of outrage that shook the walls. 34 families paying dues while you bought designer clothes with our money. My grandmother lives on Social Security and you stole her community contributions. How many other neighborhoods have you robbed? Delilah tried to maintain composure, but sweat was beading on her forehead under the fluorescent lights and the weight of 34 sets of furious eyes. This is all fabricated evidence from a conspiracy of malcontents who... That's when Patricia entered the clubhouse with Detective Sarah Williams from the County Sheriff's Department. The detective's presence transformed the atmosphere from community outrage to criminal proceeding. Badge, handcuffs, and official authority that made Delilah's face go from pale to gray. "Ms. Thornwick," Detective Williams announced in that calm cop voice that meant serious business, "we need to discuss some charges that are being filed against you." Delilah's composure finally shattered completely. Instead of cooperating or remaining silent like any sensible person facing criminal charges, she made the worst possible decision. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "I need police assistance immediately," she screamed into the phone while surrounded by 34 witnesses and Channel 7 cameras. "I'm being threatened by a dangerous mob of neighbors. Send backup right now." The clubhouse fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of sirens approaching. Everyone watched in stunned amazement as Delilah filed another false police report while standing next to an actual detective. "Ma'am," Detective Williams said with professional patience, "I am police, and you just filed a false emergency report in front of multiple witnesses." The sirens grew louder. A patrol car pulled up outside, red and blue lights reflecting through the clubhouse windows like some surreal suburban disco. The door opened, and Officer Marcus Denver walked in, removing his sunglasses with that familiar, confident stride I'd known since he was 5 years old. Delilah spun around with desperate hope. "Officer, thank God you're here! Arrest these people for threatening me!" Marcus looked around the room, taking in the financial evidence on the projector screen, the detective with handcuffs ready, the Channel 7 cameras recording everything, and his father standing calmly among 34 neighbors who'd finally had enough. "Good evening, folks," he said in that measured cop voice. "Ma'am, you called 911 to report a threatening mob?" "Yes!" Delilah shrieked, pointing dramatically at me. "That man has been stalking me, harassing me, threatening my life. I demand you arrest him immediately." Marcus looked directly at me with those questioning eyebrows I'd seen 1,000 times. "Dad, you want to explain what's happening here?" The word "dad" hit Delilah like a physical blow. Her pointing finger wavered, her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, and her brain clearly struggled to process that she'd just called the police on a police officer's father. "Well, son," I said, enjoying every second of her dawning horror. "This woman has been embezzling from our HOA, filing false police reports, and she just committed another felony by lying to 911 dispatchers about a non-existent emergency." Detective Williams stepped forward with handcuffs that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Delilah Thornwick, you're under arrest for grand larceny, organized fraud, filing false police reports, and about 6 other felonies we'll discuss downtown." The metallic click of handcuffs being applied in front of 34 neighbors and live television cameras was the most beautiful sound I'd heard since Sarah's last, "I love you." "You have the right to remain silent," Detective Williams continued, while Channel 7 cameras captured every moment for the evening news. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As they led her toward the door, Delilah's designer heels clicked one final time on the clubhouse floor, the sound of petty tyranny finally meeting professional justice. Marcus caught my eye and smiled. "Dad, next Sunday dinner is going to be interesting." The taste of victory was sweeter than Sarah's best apple pie, seasoned with the satisfaction of watching systematic evil face systematic consequences. Outside, red and blue lights painted the clubhouse in the colors of justice served properly. Some neighbors applauded, others laughed, a few actually cheered. But mostly we just stood there, savoring the silence of a community finally free from its worst resident. 3 months later, I was sitting in my kitchen, reading the morning paper when the phone rang with news I'd been waiting to hear. "Grayson, it's Patricia. Delilah just accepted the plea deal." I set down my coffee cup, savoring both the taste of good morning brew and the sweetness of final justice. "Tell me everything." "Guilty plea to felony grand larceny, organized fraud, and filing false police reports. 18 months in state prison, 5 years probation, and full restitution of $78,000 including damages and legal fees." 18 months meant Delilah would lose her real estate license permanently, face felony background checks for the rest of her life, and never be eligible to serve on another HOA board anywhere in California. Her theft had been expensive, but her punishment would last forever. The community transformation had been remarkable to witness. Within a week of Delilah's arrest, our emergency HOA meeting had unanimously elected Ethel as interim president. Her first action was implementing complete financial transparency, monthly statements, open books, and independent auditing that made embezzlement impossible. The new board eliminated every punitive fee Delilah had invented, focusing instead on genuine community maintenance and improvement. Our monthly dues actually decreased by 40% once we stopped funding her designer lifestyle. But the most satisfying change was cultural. Gone were the harassment campaigns, the petty violations, the atmosphere of suburban surveillance state. Neighbors who'd been afraid to plant flowers or park project cars suddenly felt free to enjoy their own properties. Kids played basketball without fear of citations. Mrs. Denver's beautiful flower beds bloomed without interference. My own HOA withdrawal had finally been approved, but I'd decided to stay and help rebuild what Delilah had damaged. Turns out, fighting systematic evil creates bonds stronger than any homeowners association contract. Marcus had been quietly proud of how the whole situation resolved. "Dad, you handled that like a professional investigator," he'd said during one of our Sunday dinners. "Mom would have been proud of you standing up to a bully." The community established the Sarah Mitchell Memorial Scholarship using recovered embezzlement funds, providing annual awards for local students studying public service, social work, or criminal justice. Sarah would have loved knowing that her memory was helping young people build careers protecting others. Channel 7's investigative report had triggered a state audit of HOA management practices throughout California. 3 other communities discovered their own embezzlement schemes, leading to additional arrests and recovered funds. Sometimes one person's fight for justice creates ripple effects that protect thousands of others. The practical lessons were clear. HOA withdrawal laws vary by state, so research thoroughly before filing. Document every interaction with timestamps and recordings. Financial transparency is every homeowner's legal right, and you should demand detailed accounting whenever something seems suspicious. False police reports carry serious felony penalties in most jurisdictions. But the personal lessons went deeper. After Sarah's death, I'd felt powerless against forces beyond my control. Cancer, grief, loneliness, and then Delilah's systematic harassment. Fighting back had given me purpose again, connected me with neighbors who became genuine friends, and proved that ordinary people can defeat corruption when they work together. The smell of fresh herbs from our new community garden mixed with coffee from my kitchen window as I finished reading Patricia's email with final legal details. $78,000 in recovered funds, plus the satisfaction of knowing Delilah would spend the next year and a half in state prison contemplating the expensive consequences of stealing from elderly neighbors. My phone buzzed with a text from Jerome. "Mr. Mitchell, contractor tried to overcharge Mrs. Denver for roof repairs. Told him we keep detailed records now. He suddenly found a more reasonable price." Some battles teach entire communities how to fight back against predators. But that's a story for next week. The morning sun streaming through my kitchen window felt like approval from above. Sarah's quiet satisfaction that her stubborn husband had finally learned to fight for what matters most: community, justice, and protecting people who can't always protect themselves. I raised my coffee cup in a toast to an empty kitchen that somehow felt full of possibilities. Here's to David beating Goliath, to communities that stand together, and to the beautiful sound of handcuffs clicking on people who richly deserve them. Drop your worst HOA nightmare in the comments. I read every single one, and some of these stories are wilder than fiction. Hit that subscribe button if you want more David versus Goliath justice stories where the little guy wins.